The moment you stop giving yourself away to be loved is the moment you become magnetic. Carl Jung. There is a silent reason why some women effortlessly command respect, while others, no matter how kind or giving, seem to fade into the background. It's not beauty, charm, or even confidence. It's boundaries. The invisible lines that quietly tell the world how far it can go, how deeply it can touch, and how much it can take. Without them, even love turns into exhaustion. Think of a woman who gives endlessly. She says yes when she means no, smiles when she's hurting, and stays silent to keep the peace. At first, people admire her warmth, but slowly they stop listening. Her kindness becomes expected, her patience mistaken for weakness. This is the tragedy of blurred boundaries, when love turns into self-betrayal. Carl Jung once said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because when you do, you can no longer live as a shadow of others' expectations. You begin to draw your lines, not to build walls, but to define the sacred space where respect and desire are born. In this video, we'll explore 5 psychological boundaries every woman must set if she wants to be deeply valued and desired, not for how much she gives, but for who she truly is. These boundaries are not about control. They are about freedom. Stay with me until the end, and you'll see how each one transforms not only how men see you, but how you see yourself. If you find meaning in conversations that help you understand love, respect, and the human soul, remember to like and subscribe to my channel, Jungian Mind Shift, to join this journey of inner growth. So, let us begin. 1. Emotional boundaries. Protecting your inner world. Respect always begins with emotional independence, the quiet ability to stay centered even when others try to pull you off balance. Most people think love means merging completely with another person, feeling their pain as your own, carrying their moods, and trying to fix what is broken in them. But Jung would remind us that this kind of fusion is not love, it is possession. To love someone truly, you must first learn to stand as a whole being beside them, not dissolve into their chaos. Think of how many times you have found yourself emotionally drained after trying to hold everyone else together. Maybe you listened for hours to someone who never asked how you were doing. Maybe you forgave the cold silences and guilt trips because you feared losing the connection. Or maybe you became the peacemaker, always smoothing over the storm so others could stay calm while you silently unraveled. These are the moments when your heart whispers enough, but your mind, conditioned to please, keeps saying just one more chance. Carl Jung once wrote that we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. The people who test your emotional boundaries are mirrors of your unhealed patterns. The man who withholds affection to make you chase him, the friend who uses guilt to control you, the partner who makes you responsible for their moods, they all reveal the parts of you that still confuse love with self-sacrifice. Until you make those unconscious needs conscious, you will keep giving away your peace, thinking it is love. In Jungian psychology, this dynamic often points to a conflict between the anima and the shadow. The anima, your inner feminine energy, longs to nurture, to connect, to heal. It is a sacred force, but when it is not balanced, it becomes self-erasing. The shadow, on the other hand, holds your anger, your limits, and your truth. When you suppress your shadow for too long, it does not disappear, it leaks out as exhaustion, resentment, or sudden emotional withdrawal. Setting emotional boundaries means inviting your shadow back into the light. It is saying, my empathy is a gift, not a currency. Imagine a woman named Helena. For 20 years, she played the emotional caretaker in every relationship, always listening, always soothing. When her partner grew distant, she tried harder, sending long messages, offering comfort he never asked for. One evening, she realized she had not received a genuine "How are you?" in months. That moment of silence broke something open. She wept, not because of him, but because she finally saw herself, the woman who believed love had to be earned through emotional labor. When Helena began to pull back, at first he accused her of being cold, distant, not the same anymore, but she stayed calm. She no longer explained her every feeling, no longer tried to convince him of her worth. Within weeks, something changed, not in him, but in her. She stopped chasing peace outside and found it within. And soon, he began to notice her again, not because she begged for attention, but because she radiated dignity. That is the paradox of emotional boundaries. When you stop overgiving, love grows deeper. When you no longer let guilt steer your choices, you attract people who respect your emotional sovereignty. Men do not desire endless comfort. They desire a woman whose emotions have gravity, someone who feels deeply but is not easily shaken. Ignoring this boundary leads to quiet despair. It breeds emotional burnout, the kind where you smile on the outside but feel invisible on the inside. It creates relationships that feel more like caretaking than connection. And over time, it teaches others that your needs do not matter. But when you protect your inner world, you become magnetic in a different way. You no longer react to manipulation because you recognize it as noise. You respond not out of fear, but from clarity. You give not to be needed, but because you choose to. Emotional boundaries are not coldness, they are warmth with wisdom. They tell the world, I am open, but I am not yours to control. And in that quiet strength, respect is born, the kind that draws love without demand. 2. Communication boundaries, speaking with clarity and confidence. If emotional boundaries protect the heart, communication boundaries protect the voice. They are the bridge between your inner truth and the outer world, the point where your feelings take form through language. A woman who communicates clearly, who can say what she means without apology, radiates a quiet power that cannot be ignored. Her words are neither sharp nor soft, they're simply true. Many women, especially those raised to keep harmony, learn early that silence keeps the peace. They are told not to argue, not to raise their voices, not to upset anyone. These small lessons shape a pattern that lasts decades. You learn to filter your truth before it leaves your mouth, to soften your words until they lose their meaning, to hesitate before saying no. You begin to fear being seen as difficult or unkind. Jung would say this is the persona at work, the social mask that protects us, but also separates us from authenticity. Yet when you suppress your voice to maintain peace, you begin to lose connection with your inner world. The relationship might survive on the surface, but beneath it grows resentment and quiet despair. Because unspoken truth doesn't disappear, it hides. And what hides becomes the shadow, the repressed energy that returns in irritation, tears, or sudden silence. To communicate clearly is not only an act of courage, it is an act of integration. You give your shadow a voice and bring your inner and outer worlds into alignment. In Jungian psychology, the ability to speak truthfully is part of individuation, the process of becoming whole. Each time you say what you really mean, you reclaim a piece of your lost self. Jung believed that language was the outer expression of the soul. To speak consciously is to bring the unconscious into light. But here lies one of the most fascinating tensions in modern psychology, because not all theorists agree with Jung. Some researchers, such as Dr. Deborah Tannen of Georgetown University, argue that communication styles are deeply shaped by gender and culture rather than purely by the unconscious. Her studies suggest that women often use a relational, empathy-based way of speaking, focusing on connection, tone, and understanding, while men often favor direct, result-oriented speech. This difference does not mean one is right and the other is wrong, but it raises a question. Should women always aim to speak more directly, or is there power in relational language itself? Tannen warns that when women are told to speak more like men, they risk losing the emotional nuance that gives their voice its humanity. Others, like Dr. Jordan Peterson, take a different stance that resonates more closely with Jung. Peterson argues that clear, structured speech is a moral responsibility. He believes that truth and language are inseparable, that to speak precisely is to think precisely, and that vagueness allows chaos to grow. From his perspective, when a person cannot express herself clearly, she becomes vulnerable to confusion, resentment, and manipulation, both from others and from her own unconscious drives. Speech, therefore, becomes not just communication, but a form of order, a way to transform emotional chaos into meaning. These opposing views create a rich field of psychological debate. Jung saw speech as the voice of the self, the bridge between the conscious and unconscious realms. Tannen views it as a social construct, shaped by cultural expectations and power dynamics. Peterson sees it as a moral act of truth-telling. Each perspective carries part of the truth. To understand communication boundaries fully, one must hold all three. When these ideas meet, a deeper insight emerges. Communication boundaries are not about tone. They are about truth. Whether gentle or firm, your voice becomes powerful when it is aligned with your inner clarity. It no longer tries to win approval or control outcomes. It simply names what is real. Without this boundary, relationships drown in unspoken tension. Words become tools of defense rather than bridges of understanding. You begin to doubt yourself, to second-guess every sentence, and slowly lose faith in your right to be heard. But when you claim your voice, something changes. Others listen differently. Your presence carries weight, not because you demand it, but because truth commands quiet attention. Communication boundaries, at their essence, are the practice of bringing the soul into language. They invite you to speak from presence, to let your voice mirror your inner balance. It is here that self-respect becomes audible, and where love begins to sound like freedom. Have you ever noticed how your relationships change when you finally speak your truth, instead of softening it to keep the peace?
3. Time and space boundaries. Valuing your own life. Time and space are the quiet currencies of respect. They reveal what you value most and how deeply you value yourself. When a woman begins to treat her time as sacred, she sends a clear signal to the world that her life has meaning beyond anyone else's schedule. This kind of boundary is not loud or defensive, but deeply grounded. It tells others that your existence is whole and rich, not waiting to be filled by someone else's presence. Carl Jung often spoke of the self as the center of psychic balance, the place within us that holds both solitude and connection. He believed that a person who cannot be alone cannot truly love, because love requires two whole individuals meeting, not two halves clinging. To guard your time and your personal space is to protect that center. Without it, relationships become parasitic rather than mutual. You lose your inner rhythm, always dancing to someone else's tune. Many women struggle with this boundary because they have been taught that devotion means availability. From early on, they are praised for giving up their time to care for others, for being flexible, for always saying yes. This cultural pattern creates what Jung would call an overdeveloped anima, the archetype of nurturance, that when unbalanced becomes self-erasure. Women begin to equate love with constant presence, forgetting that absence too has value. Men, by contrast, are often socialized around a different psychological script. They are encouraged to protect their time fiercely, to focus on purpose, work, or mastery. A man who spends long hours in solitude or pursuit of his goals is often admired as ambitious or disciplined. But when a woman does the same, she is often labeled distant or selfish. This double standard reflects not a difference in human nature, but a cultural misunderstanding of feminine independence. Jung might say that society projects its collective shadow onto women who choose solitude, seeing in them the freedom it secretly envies. To value your time and space is not to reject others, it is to cultivate self-containment, that subtle quality Jung described as psychic wholeness. A woman who has her own routines, passions, and moments of quiet does not appear distant, she appears luminous. There is mystery around her because she is not constantly available. Her absence has texture. It makes her presence meaningful. Men respond to this energetically. They respect the woman who can say, "I have plans," not as an excuse, but as truth. It shows she has a life that breathes, even when he is not there. Consider how relationships shift when time is unbalanced. When one person gives endlessly, dropping everything, rearranging schedules, canceling self-care, a subtle hierarchy forms. The giver unconsciously becomes smaller. The receiver unconsciously takes more. Respect erodes not because love fades, but because equality disappears. Jung would interpret this as a loss of psychic symmetry. One ego expands while the other contracts. In such dynamics, attraction often dies, not from lack of affection, but from imbalance. In healthy love, both partners guard their time. A man who truly respects a woman does not want her to orbit around him. He admires her independence. He finds beauty in her purpose. This dynamic mirrors what Jung called the union of opposites, two complete beings who meet without consuming each other. Their connection breathes because both have inner worlds to return to. Ignoring this boundary leads to quiet depletion. You start to lose the sense of who you are when you are alone. You begin to measure your worth by how much others need you. This is the beginning of emotional invisibility, when your life becomes a background to someone else's story. But when you protect your time and space, you begin to reclaim authorship of your own narrative. You realize that rest is not laziness, that pursuing your interests is not selfish, that being unavailable sometimes is an act of love, love for yourself. Jung once said that solitude is the workshop of transformation. It is in solitude that we meet the parts of ourselves that no one else can reflect back. Time spent alone is not a void. It is the fertile ground where self-respect grows roots. A woman who values her own life, who guards her time with quiet confidence, does not need to demand respect. Her rhythm commands it naturally. Her boundaries become invisible architecture, shaping her relationships with strength and grace.
4. Values and principles, standing firm in what you believe. There is something magnetic about a person who knows what they stand for. You can feel it in their presence, a quiet steadiness that does not waver under pressure. In relationships, this quality is rare because many of us have learned to trade our convictions for peace. But peace without integrity is not peace at all. It is silent resentment. When a woman stands firm in her values, when she can say, "This is what I believe, and this is how I live," she commands a kind of respect that no charm or beauty can replace. Carl Jung often wrote that the foundation of character is alignment between the conscious and the unconscious self. He saw moral clarity not as moral superiority, but as integration, the harmony between what you know to be right and what you actually do. This alignment is what makes a person trustworthy. When you uphold your values, you are not performing righteousness. You are allowing your inner truth to shape your outer life. Modern psychology confirms that consistency between belief and behavior is one of the strongest markers of emotional intelligence. Studies on moral psychology show that people who act in accordance with their core principles experience lower stress, stronger confidence, and greater resilience in relationships. It is not the absence of conflict that creates respect, but the presence of integrity when conflict arises. Men, in particular, are deeply influenced by this quality. While they may be drawn to beauty or warmth, what ultimately holds their admiration is integrity, the sense that a woman cannot be bought by attention or swayed by pressure. A man respects a woman who has lines she will not cross, even for him. It tells him she is not living through his approval, but through her own compass. Jung would describe this as a woman living from herself, not her persona. She does not change her shape to fit the room. She brings her truth into it. However, this strength is often misunderstood. Some psychologists, such as Carl Rogers, emphasized empathy and flexibility over firmness, arguing that rigid adherence to principle can limit growth. Rogers believed that authenticity also requires openness, the willingness to listen, to evolve, and to adapt one's beliefs when new understanding arises. Jung, on the other hand, believed that growth comes from tension, the pull between what we know and what we are asked to reconsider. To hold firm without closing off, to listen without surrendering your core, is the mark of mature individuation. The deeper truth is that values are meant to center us. When you stand firm with calm confidence, you create a safe psychological field around you. People may not always agree with you, but they will trust your presence. In a world full of noise, that trust becomes rare and precious. Compromising your values for approval might buy temporary comfort, but it always costs long-term respect. Each time you silence your truth to be liked, a part of you retreats into the shadow, unseen, unheard, waiting for you to remember it. Over time, this disconnect breeds anxiety and self-doubt. You begin to lose faith not only in others, but in yourself. But when you choose integrity, even in small moments, you send a powerful message. I am not afraid to be known. That clarity invites others to rise to the same level. It challenges them to meet you with honesty rather than pretense. Respect, in the end, is not given. It is evoked by consistency between word and action. To stand firm in your values is to live without masks, to let your truth shape your relationships and your destiny. It is the quiet courage of being the same person when someone is watching and when no one is. Have you ever noticed how the people who live by their principles seem to walk through life with peace, even when the world around them disagrees?
5. Physical and intimacy boundaries. Control over your body and space. Every relationship, no matter how emotional or spiritual, is also physical. The body is the vessel through which we express affection, safety, and trust. Yet it is also where many women learn their first lessons in self-betrayal, when they allow proximity that feels wrong, when they remain silent instead of stepping back, or when they say yes simply to avoid disappointment. Physical boundaries are not about distance, they are about ownership. They declare that your body and your space belong to you, not to anyone's expectations. Carl Jung believed that the body is a living expression of the unconscious. Every instinct, every tension, every quiet discomfort is the psyche trying to speak through sensation. When you ignore that voice, when you override your body's warning in order to please, you fracture the connection between your conscious mind and your deeper self. In Jung's view, you move away from individuation, from the wholeness that unites spirit and flesh. The act of saying no to unwanted closeness is not rejection, it is self-integration. Gender studies have long noted how differently men and women are socialized around bodily autonomy. Men are often encouraged to assert physical presence through posture, space, or even touch as a sign of confidence. Women, conversely, are taught to minimize their presence, to be approachable, gentle, and accommodating. This conditioning creates an invisible imbalance. A woman who sets clear physical boundaries is often mislabeled as cold or unfeeling, when in reality, she is embodying the deepest form of self-respect. Jung might interpret this as the reconciliation between the anima and the animus, the inner feminine learning to assert and the inner masculine learning to honor restraint. In relationships, these boundaries shape not only attraction, but also trust. A man who truly values a woman will respect her pace. He understands that intimacy grows from safety, not from pressure. When a woman feels free to decide when and how she shares her body, desire becomes sacred, not transactional. This is why rushing physical closeness rarely leads to lasting connection. It may create intensity, but not intimacy. Real intimacy requires rhythm, the slow alignment of bodies, emotions, and intentions. Physical boundaries extend far beyond the realm of romance. They include your personal space, your home, your routines. They define how close someone can stand, when they can visit, and how you allow others to move within your environment. Maintaining these limits is not about building walls. It is about shaping a space where peace can exist. Jung once wrote that the soul needs a container, a symbolic home where it can rest without intrusion. Your physical boundaries are that container, the external reflection of your inner sanctuary. When you neglect this boundary, your body often becomes the first messenger. You may feel drained around certain people, tense in specific spaces, or restless after too much contact. These signals are not weaknesses,
They are wisdom. The body keeps score of every small compromise. Listening to it is not selfish, it is self-awareness. A woman who is comfortable in her own skin does not seek validation through closeness. She invites connection through presence. She is at home within herself, and that calm self-possession naturally commands respect.
In the end, boundaries are not about keeping people away. They are about inviting the right kind of closeness. They are the architecture of self-respect, the invisible framework that holds love, peace, and dignity together. When you live with emotional balance, speak with clarity, protect your time, stand firm in your values, and honor your body, you begin to move through the world differently. You stop begging for respect because you already embody it. Carl Jung believed that every human being is on a path toward wholeness. He called this the journey of individuation, where we learn to unite the conscious and the unconscious, the light and the shadow, the giving and the receiving. Boundaries are the map that guide you through that journey. They keep you rooted in your truth while allowing love to flow freely around you. They remind you that real connection does not require self-abandonment. It requires self-awareness. When you honor your own limits, you begin to attract relationships that feel calm, respectful, and genuine. You stop being drained by those who take and instead find balance with those who see. Respect from others always mirrors the respect you hold for yourself. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to join our growing circle of reflection here at Jungian Mind Shift. Like the video if it brought you insight. Share it with someone who may need to hear these words, and subscribe to continue exploring the wisdom of Carl Jung and the psychology of self-respect, love, and inner growth.